throughout.
Cool. Hey everyone, we are live here on the Unready Room talking about Star Trek IV, the Voyage Home, also known as, of course, as the one with the whales for the uninitiated. So welcome to my co-hosts, Brandy and Bruce. I'm so bad at that. I don't know why I can't get that right. Hi, how's it going?
Oh, we're well, right? We're just
sure. Oh, we're fine. We're totally fine. I'm functioning within established parameters. Wait, that's the wrong series. I feel fine.
Excellent. Bruce, how are you doing? How do you feel?
I'm swimmingly good as I think about whales.
Excellent.
But yes, I am fine. I'm fine. We're all fine here. Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you?
That's the wrong franchise.
I know, I was going down the wrong road there. Woohoo! Sorry.
I'm just gonna go like this. How do you feel? How do you feel?
We're just having bad weather.
How do you feel?
Well, clearly my internet is at the exact levels that it usually is and is wonderful. So I apologize if I end up out of sync with the two of you, as just happened there, obviously. But I want to talk a little bit about our experience watching this film recently, because I think all three of us rewatched it for this occasion. Did everybody watch it today or in the last week?
Yes. Today.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I watched it today as well. Cool. I do know this movie backwards and forwards. I've watched it so many times. It was kind of my go-to when I was a kid. I was homesick. I'd pop in the VHS and watch it. And that version of the film is so imprinted on my brain that, like, the pan and scan 4:3 version, that like every time they show the shot of the painted HMS Bounty on the side of the Klingon ship, I'm expecting a pan of the whole name. And every time it's a still nailed down camera shot, I'm just like, that looks weird. So like, it's just so imprinted on my brain.
I hated the pan and scan stuff. I remember I think it came out with a VHS director's cut with the commentary or something with Leonard Nimoy that actually had it in letterbox on VHS, if I remember correctly. But
I had that.
Okay.
But cool.
You know, I like certain things, like when Scotty McCoy and Sulu are walking down the street in front of the building that's painted with the Pacific Bell thing, and Sulu is like you briefly see him and then gets cut off. Like he's not even in the scene. I remember that in the pan scan, because then when they would roll the credits on the VHS version, they would put it in letterbox, and I'd be like, oh, well, Sulu was in that scene. You just never saw him.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm so happy that, like, for me, that was how the movie was, because I never saw this in theaters. So my first time seeing it was that VHS. So like years later, when I saw the DVD for the first time and it was actually in widescreen, like it was a whole new world. It was amazing. So that's funny.
See, you know, I refrained because I knew Bruce was going to do that.
I was watching it, Brandy. I thought, is she going to do it?
But yeah, this film has such just a great place in the Star Trek universe. It established so much, and it uses the lore in just such an amazing way. It really is just kind of this landmark moment in Star Trek. And I mean, 1986 is just the middle of these Kirk era films, and just that singular time in Star Trek is such a unique place. I personally, I listened to the William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy commentary on the Blu-ray, which was a lot of fun. I don't know why I haven't listened to all the commentaries on the Trek films that I have on Blu-ray. I need to sit down and do that sometime, because it was such a great experience. There's another commentary on there, of course, with Roberta Orsi and Alex Kurtzman. And Bruce, you listened to that one, is that right?
I did. I never listened to that before, but I had time to watch the movie today, and I wanted to listen to one of the commentaries, and I was like, which one do I want to do? And I don't recall, but I think I have listened to the Shatner Nimoy before years ago. So I did the or see Kurtzman one, just out of curiosity.
Nice. And Brandy, you watched it sans commentary, is that correct?
I did. I was going to watch with one of the commentaries, and then I just didn't feel like having someone talk over the movie through the whole thing, so I just didn't. And I did put on the subtitles, though, because there were little things here and there that, after so many times seeing it, I thought I knew the exact line, and to realize, oh no, there's a different word there. Then I thought, oh, that's slightly different than what I thought they were saying. So it was very interesting to do it with the subtitles on.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that about the subtitles, because TJ has a comment here, which is absolutely true. It's so quotable. Like, there are so many lines in this film that are just, I found myself sometimes not quite mouthing along, but like just anticipating the next line watching this movie. Like, it's just so imprinted on my brain. And I'm curious, you said there were some lines that you were surprised by that you didn't realize were what they were. I'm curious if you have a couple examples, because I'm wondering about that.
No, well, the one that springs to mind is when Jillian's trying to come with them to the future, and he says, "I don't have time to argue with you." And then I thought he said, "I want to tell you how much you've meant to us," but that's not what he says. He says, "Or tell you how much you've meant to us." So it was like, "I don't have time to argue with you or tell you how much you've meant to us. Give me the radio frequency." And so that put a slightly different spin on his her. I understood her reaction better, I guess, because of what he actually said versus what I thought he said.
That's interesting, because I always thought he said the other one too. That's really interesting
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Just one of those things. I'm like, okay. I had that wrong for 35 years.
Unless what the subtitle said what was in the script, but Shatner didn't deliver it that way, and whoever was doing the transcribing.
No, I backed it up and looked at it again, and it looks like he's saying "or," not "I."
Interesting.
Yeah.
Not "I want," but "or tell you" is what he said.
Yeah.
So I mentioned how when I was a kid, the first time I saw it was the VHS, probably rented from a local video rental place. I'm curious when and how the two of you first saw Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, because I'll admit I'm the little kid of this group. I was 1986. I was alive, but I was not going to theaters and watching Star Trek films.
Yeah. Brandy and I went together. When was that? That was on a Friday night, right?
It was on a Friday night, which is really unusual because, my parents didn't usually let me go out at that age with strange men, but she was totally fine with it. She's like, "No, you kids have fun."
So when did you see it? You saw it in theaters though, right?
I did. We started going to the Star Trek movies as a family with Search for Spock, because we were too young for the motion picture and for Wrath of Khan, which we saw on home video multiple times before Search for Spock. And from that point on, all the original series movies we saw as a family. So we went as a family, and I remember that, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was in Salt Lake City, or was it in North Salt Lake? North Salt Lake is a totally different city and a totally different county, even though they're right next to each other. It's very confusing. People get very annoyed. But I do think it was downtown Salt Lake City, because that's where the biggest theaters was, and it was in one of the really big theaters because everyone wanted to see this film. And so I remember we were in an area all together that was kind of close, not like super close to the screen, but it was kind of one of those things that had like a little wall in front of us, so there was nobody blocking our view. And that made me really happy. And I think I actually made it through the film without having to get up to pee, so that was an accomplishment.
Wow.
That's amazing.
I can never watch this movie again without thinking of that now.
That's what I'm here to do, ruin your experience.
So Bruce, probably at that very moment that Brandy was proud of herself for making it through the entire film without having to use the facilities, you were across the country in another part of the country watching it in your own theater. So
Absolutely, yeah. I was also very proud that I didn't have to get up and use the bathroom during the movie too. I went with my parents and my brother, my younger brother, and he's my only brother, but he's younger. And that would have, so 86, I would have been 18 when the movie came out. And we were living outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania at the time. And I remember going, if anybody's listening from the area or watching this, I don't think this theater exists anymore, but it was in Trexlertown, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Allentown. It was at the Trexler Mall Cinema. And we went as a family. And I don't really remember any details of what they thought. I think they liked the movie. I think afterwards I remember my mom talking about it and laughing. But I know it's the last time that my parents went to a Star Trek movie. They saw, as a family, we saw the motion picture, The Wrath of Khan. My parents did not go to see Search for Spock, but we did all go see The Voyage Home. But that was the last time they went to a Star Trek movie. Then I went by myself to see The Final Frontier, but then my brother did see The Undiscovered Country with me, and that's the last time he went to see a Star Trek movie in a theater. But I've seen them all in the theaters, every single movie.
Yeah. So I'm curious at the time, like, I think of this as a fan favorite. Like, I just absolutely am filled with joy every time I watch it. What was it like in the theater? Like, was the general public laughing at all the right places? Was there cheers, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I remember a lot of laughter. Yeah.
Yep, we were in a very full theater, so there was a lot of laughter, there was cheering, there was clapping when the credits started, which is not something you really get a lot of these days. But we had a great time. I remember just everybody was just so happy and uplifted when we were leaving the theater. So yeah. We had a great time.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, happy and uplifted, because there's no such thing, I think, as like a Star Trek Christmas movie, but I don't know why this one just kind of fills that little bit of a feeling for me. And
it came out in November, dude.
Ah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It feels like a festive movie, even though there's no Christmassy thing about it. But I think part of that might also be the soundtrack, which I do want to talk about a little bit. If you divorce the soundtrack from the film and just listen to it by itself, it absolutely sounds like a fun, jaunty Christmas movie.
Yeah.
Like there's people chasing a Santa through a mall or something. It's like what the music sounds like to me. And there's even like little bells and stuff. I love the soundtrack to this. And it's so different from any other Star Trek film.
Yeah, the Orsi Kurtzman commentary, they said that when the music was playing at the beginning, they said, that reminds them of holiday music, which is funny because the movie did come out the holidays. So they were mentioning that too.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess let's just jump right into the movie. So, I mean, I think most Star Trek fans are pretty familiar with this film. We're not going to like pick it apart scene by scene or anything like that. And just we're just going to talk generally about the film and stuff. It's been talked about a lot, of course. So at the start of the film, we pick up right from the search for Spock. And it's also a very unique story in that they're not on the Enterprise. They have this Klingon rust bucket, as McCoy calls it. They've dubbed the HMS Bounty, and they're going to take it back to Earth to face trial. It really has... It's funny that this one has become kind of one of the more popular with the general public Star Trek films, because it feels like you need to know a lot of lore coming into it. But I think they do a good job of just kind of like, not a big deal. This is what happened. We have the scene in the council chambers kind of recapping things, and they launch you into it and say like, okay, that all happened. This is why this is this way. Let's just have fun with this movie now. What do you guys think about the like circumstances, I guess, at the start of the film?
It seems like it would be confusing to some people who didn't see the others, right?
It always seemed that way to me, and it seems funny that like there are people that have like, oh, I saw Star Trek 4, I really liked it, but I didn't really watch any of the others. I'm like, huh, interesting.
Well, I think that, yeah, in order to understand why Spock's so weird and why everybody's treating him like with kid gloves for a bit, you don't understand that really until, you have slight context throughout the film. But it's not really about that so much as the chemistry of the cast, and especially the chemistry of Leonard Nimoy in this film, because he's always been the one that has this charisma that just seems to carry everything along with it. And that was very apparent in the original series in the 60s, because Spock got a lot of fan mail from the ladies.
Mhm.
So, but I think it was not just Leonard Nimoy, his performance, but it was also his direction that made this so accessible. Because here you've got a film that is giving an environmental message, which we were only just really starting to talk heavily about in the 80s. And also, there's no clear enemy in this film. There's no clear bad guy unless you count Man, which is kind of the enemy. Man kills off his own future. So there's no one bad guy to focus hate on. It's almost like a heist movie in a way.
Yeah, Orsi and Kurtzman talked about that too in the commentary, that when we finally see those the guys on the ship after the whales, what do you call them, seamen or whatever, but they're hunters or what, I don't know.
Whalers. They're whalers.
Whalers.
Yep.
When the whalers, they said, "Oh, and here we finally get to the villain of the movie here at the end." And they said, Man is the villain of this, but you don't have a villain throughout the whole movie until you get to this one scene, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's funny on the Nimoy Shatner commentary. They talk a little bit about this, and Nimoy in particular talking about kind of the genesis of the film and how they started from that point. Basically, they sat down, they said, we want a film where there's no heavy, there's no bad guy. And that's how it became the movie. Like, I guess maybe when I was watching it, I thought maybe that was a consequence of the story they wanted to tell, that like, oh, we don't really have a villain. Okay, well, but to learn that they started from that point, they said, let's craft a story where there's no villain. There's no person that we're that's the antagonist kind of thing.
Then why do they feel like they have to do that for every movie when this was one of the most successful? Every movie since has had a villain. They feel like they have to do that.
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because I was reading about the production of the film, and there were certain, like the first draft of the film, they were like, no, this is not what we wanted. And there was some really weird stuff that I'm super glad that they did not do. Like, just really weird stuff, like Saavik was staying on Vulcan because she was pregnant with Spock's child.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, no, for so many reasons. Not that I object to Spock having a child. That's not it. It's just that the way that child would have been conceived is on the Genesis planet with, a guy who didn't actually have his soul or anything and was pretty much a teenager at the time. And that's just like, no.
I can't remember if that's in the novelization or not. I don't know if I've read that. I've heard that before, but I don't know if it made it in the novelization or not.
I pray that it didn't, because just no.
Leonard Nimoy did touch briefly on that in the commentary, basically saying that they did the scene the way they did to kind of leave it open. So they didn't say yes, they didn't say no. He figured, like, if we do another movie, maybe that's something that somebody will want to pick up on. Maybe not. He was kind of leaving that open. But to Brandy, your point, probably best left not fulfilled there.
It's not the idea of Spock getting it on. It's the idea of that wasn't really him and it was a teenager. That's my problem. So yeah.
Totally shifting gears, and just a quick aside here, David Henderson, I am so glad I'm not the only person that had that go through my head when Whalers was said. Maybe I'm not normal, but at least I have other people that are as crazy as me. So thank you so much for that, David.
There you go.
Man. Okay. So yeah, we're leaving Vulcan, and we have, of course, the crisis happening on Earth. This probe is coming and ionizing the atmosphere and directing these transmissions toward the ocean. An interesting thing from the commentary, and I did kind of know this before, they had the idea that, like, the basic beginning of the idea was something had been missing in the 20th century that affects the future, the 23rd century. And what could that be? And for a lot of development of the film, it was actually going to be something like a plant, and the idea of, mounting this huge mission, going back in time 300 years and expending all of this effort for this tiny plant was kind of like one of the hooks they were thinking about, but it was just never quite grabbing them. And then, of course, the idea of the whales is what really just propelled this film. And the whole mystery of what this probe is doing and what the sounds are, I think, is so compelling. And I remember as a kid just being so fascinated by that. I love that aspect of the story.
Yes, I agree. And I think Leonard was the one who basically nixed the whole plant thing, because it was going to be about, deforestation of the rainforests. And because of that, now there wasn't this cure for this horrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but he's just like, no one is going to be moved by us going back in time to pick up a plant. So that's when they landed on the whales. And speaking of the probe, I feel this is a good time to bring this up. I found this out again by reading about the production. Leonard Nimoy wanted a certain sound for the probe, not the actual transmissions, but the probe itself. And they weren't quite getting it. And so he says, no, it's got to be more like a whoop, 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 whoop. And so they're like, oh! And so they recorded him doing that and then altered it slightly. So the sound of the probe is Leonard Nimoy, y'all.
Oh, he should be in the credits for that.
Right? He totally should.
Leonard Nimoy as probe. People will be like,
yep.
What?
Yes.
That's
and
awesome.
Apparently, yeah, I'm sorry. Apparently the ball was originally like orange, but it looked too much like a basketball, so they made it a volleyball. Go on. My apologies.
Wilson. It's Wilson.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I had not known that, and I think that's just a wonderful little piece of trivia. I think that's so cool. And before we started recording, I was saying, like, I want to hear that original recording of him now. Like,
right?
I know. I was just thinking, I wish he was still alive, because I'd like to ask him to do it at a convention.
My husband said the same thing when I told him that story. He's like, oh, that was before dubstep.
That's funny. Oh, that's great. Patrick here says, my mom and I have always called the probe the giant Tootsie Roll. I've never seen, I don't think I remember ever seeing the model like photographed outside of what you see on screen. I'd be curious to see what that looks like, because it's very simple. It has a simplicity to it, but there's also just like a really interesting look to its surface and the way they light it and stuff. I think it's really fascinating. And like ILM, they're geniuses. Like, this is such a simple design, but it looks so otherworldly and so alien. I always loved the look of it and wanted to learn more about it watching this as a kid.
You're talking about the probe or Tootsie Rolls?
The probe, but yeah.
Yeah. That was when I was a kid, though. I'm looking at that. I'm like, okay, so that's like a foil covered paper roll, empty paper towel roll, excuse me, with a volleyball hanging out of it. And I've never been able to unsee that, but they went through a few things before they got to that final product, because they wanted it to actually be all black and it wasn't showing up right. And so they did all of these different things and then got that silver sheen on it and had all these lights inside it. And what it became was definitely the best possible thing that they could do. And it was interesting and different and like nothing we've seen before or since.
Mm-hmm.
Now I just wish it was a giant Leonard Nimoy flying through space.
Oh my goodness. So I can't get that image out of my head now.
Great. I've ruined it for everyone. You're welcome.
I love also, and I kind of knew this as well, but the transmissions from the probe, apparently the studio really wanted them to be subtitled because, audiences would not understand. They'd be confused and they wouldn't get it. And this is, not even just the conversation between the probe and the whales at the end, but at the beginning when it first appears, they wanted subtitles like, "Where are you? Where are you? I can't find you," or something like that. And Leonard Nimoy he brings it up several times. So you can tell this is something that's kind of stuck in his craw a little bit. And he fought for them to not have the subtitles. And the way he explains it makes so much sense because one of the key themes of the movie, one of the key ideas behind it is the transmissions that are being sent are not meant for human beings. Right. They are not meant for us. So why should we understand them? They should be otherworldly and completely alien, and we should not be able to listen in on this conversation because it's not meant for man. It's not meant for us. Why would we get an insight into their syntax and stuff? I thought that was brilliant. I was like, oh yeah, it works better without subtitles, but that added understanding of how that fits in with the whole idea behind the movie just really hit home, and you can tell why he's so passionate about that. I'm really glad that they ended up acquiescing and basically it took like questions to test audiences and them saying, "Oh no, I got it. It's fine," for them to say, "Oh, okay, fine. You don't have to put subtitles." But I think that would have been an awful decision.
It would have been. I personally feel that it never would have happened. Not with Leonard Nimoy at the helm. There was no way that they were going to get that in there. He was implacable. He was not going to move on that one thing. He might compromise on other things because of budgetary restraints or visual effects restraints or what have you. But that one thing, he was going to make sure that there were no subtitles or die trying.
Mm-hmm. And it was just subtitles for the probe, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I were him, I'd say like, what, you guys want me to subtitle the whales too? I mean, I've never seen a movie with whales that has subtitles what they're saying. I mean, come on.
Well, they did want the subtitles of the probe and the whales.
Oh, they wanted both.
Yep, absolutely.
That's crazy. That's just
it would have been nuts.
Yeah.
Well, see, and that's the thing is that networks and well, not networks, but in this case, studios, but often networks too. They think people are so dumb. Mm-hmm. They really do. And so they pick out, like when they have these focus groups and test groups, there'll be the one idiot who has no idea what's happening. And that'll be the person that they listen to. Mm-hmm. And I have never understood that. Why would you cater to those people? They are small in number.
I mean, that's like subtitling Benji. Like or Lassie, the dogs movie, like they bark and then the humans translate it. What's that, Lassie? So-and-so's hurt. We need to go save him. Okay. And people are going like, I don't understand what Lassie was saying.
Yeah. There are literally people like that. I swear in every focus group, every test audience out there, and then the studios listen to them instead of the masses that are like, no, I totally understood that.
Mm-hmm. Well, they definitely made the right decision ultimately because and we're jumping all over the place, but like that final conversation between the probe and the whales, I think is so cool. You can imagine what they're saying if you want, but I think it works just so well, just knowing that like they're having this conversation, and the humans did their small part to facilitate that, but it's up to them. Ultimately, George and Gracie save humanity at the end of the movie by, telling, as McCoy says, telling this probe what the hell to go do with itself. Which I love that.
That's great. This is the way I've always looked at it when that scene happens, is that I just made up the dialogue in my little kid head, and it stuck with me to this day. So it's like the whale's going, "Hey, what you doing?" And the probe's like, "Dude, we have been calling you for hours upon hours. Why didn't you pick up?" "Oh, I'm so sorry, you guys. We just got here." "What do you mean you just got here?" Well, it's kind of tricky, but we were in one time and now we're in another. And so could you please just let these people alone?" "Well, why did you have to come from another time?" "Well, because we were hunted to extinction." "Oh, that's it. I'm destroying this." No, guys, we're fine. We're fine. We're protected now. They understand what they did. My wife's pregnant. We're going to repopulate the species. It's fine. So you can go home. Okay. Okay, bye.
That is good. Like, why does the probe have to just attack Earth in a sense? The waters are going crazy, the weather's going nuts and stuff. I mean, that's like somebody going to someone's house, like, "Oh, I've been calling the house. Mom's not answering the phone. I'm worried about her. I'm going to go check and see how she's doing." They go and they knock on the door. And they start spray painting the house and taking the hose and spraying things and destroying everything outside the house. No, you just ask, "Are you home?"
Well, the thing is the probe seems, Spock even says the probe doesn't seem to know that its transmissions are destructive.
Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't care what's on land. Like, the land is just all these rocky bits. He's trying to talk to the whales who are in the ocean, and they're not getting destroyed by high winds blowing across the earth. So yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
But there's always that one guy on Earth that's saying, "Well, we needed rain."
It's true. It's funny because it's true.
Right.
Absolutely. Going back to Brandy, your translation of the conversation, I always just imagined it started with "new phone, who dis," but I love making you laugh so much. It's my favorite thing. Oh man. So we get the crew using the Klingon rust bucket to go back in time, using the slingshot maneuver to get some humpback whales, because they discover what the probe's messages mean. Which, that's kind of the big thing that Uhura gets to do in the movie, which is kind of cool, figuring out how it would sound underwater. And then later on, she helps Chekhov. One thing I liked about this movie is, I think ultimately, because it's directed by Leonard Nimoy, he gives each character something to do and treats everybody in the cast with respect. Some get more to do than others, but everybody has at least some part to play in the overall story, which I really appreciated, and it's definitely not the case in all the films.
Yeah, because when you mentioned not everyone's treated the same, I don't know if we've ever seen the scene. I don't know if it was ever shot, but there was supposed to be a scene with Sulu finding a relative of his.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was, they talked about this in the commentary as well. And basically what happened was they had a set number of hours, basically, that they could shoot in the city of San Francisco. And they kept going long. And when it finally came time to shoot that part, the kid, who was actually Sulu's great-grandfather, they just had very little time to get it done, and he was upset and crying and just not cooperative on the day. And they finally had to make that tough decision at the end of the day to say, okay, we have to cut this part of the film because we're out of time and it's not working, which is unfortunate because Sulu does get a little bit to do in the movie. I would have loved to have seen that aspect of the story. He does get to fly a Huey and deliver some plexiglass, which is cool. But I was always really curious to see that part of the film realized.
Yeah, that kid will not be famous now. He ruined his chances.
Oh, too bad. Yeah, poor great grandpa Sulu. Yeah, absolutely. What do we want to talk about now? So we've got basically a fish out of water story, which is fun. The time travel aspect gives that that feeling of disconnect, and I love Kirk's introduction to everything, saying, this is an extremely primitive and paranoid culture. No doubt many of their customs will take us by surprise. I love the idea of looking at, I say American culture in the 80s from this outsider view of, it's one of those things that I think a lot of people don't do and don't get a lot of opportunity to do, is look at their culture, their own culture from the outside. And, living overseas can do that when you come back home and you kind of recognize the subconscious things that we do that you think are just totally normal, but no, they're your culture, they're your customs, they're, that sort of thing. So I always like that kind of framing of that. And I think as a kid watching that, it really affected me. Are we a primitive and paranoid culture? I guess to them we are. And oh yeah, look at we're smoking, we're polluting, judging by the pollution content in the atmosphere, we've arrived in the latter half of the 20th century. Great line. I love that whole aspect of the film.
Agree.
Yes. No, but it's funny because as you're talking through that, when Star Trek is known for visiting other planets, it's holding a mirror to us, those other planets. It's supposed to be a sneaky way to look at ourselves by looking at these other aliens. And then this movie takes that concept, but turns it around and makes us the aliens.
Mm-hmm.
We're alien in a lot of ways to the Enterprise crew because we're their past and our society is so different. And so even though they're visiting Earth, again, it's not their Earth, so it's alien to them. So we become the aliens of this movie.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I do, like I said, I love that aspect of it. And one thing that reminded me also in the commentary, there was a lot of thought given to what should they wear? If they just wear their regular costumes, they'll really stand out. Maybe we need to have somebody make costumes that they wear to blend in. And Leonard Nimoy went scouting in San Francisco for filming locations. Looking around, he's like, yeah, never mind, we're good. They'll just blend right in, it's fine.
I have been to San Francisco in the 80s, and I can confirm they absolutely would not have stood out.
Yeah.
Except for, when he says, break up, you look like a cadet review. And they're all just like, where are we supposed to go? We don't know this place. Great awkwardness there.
Absolutely. One thing that surprised me is how many parts of this movie are improvised. And one thing I've always learned about Star Trek, especially the shows and that sort of thing, was you never deviate from the script, right? There's anecdotal stories of the script having two ands, something blah 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 and blah blah blah, and they have to call the producers to call the writers to make sure was that intentional or not, and everybody knows it's not, but we gotta sit here on set while they call and all this kind of stuff. But there are a number of scenes in this film that the actors were able to improvise some things a little bit. The most famous being Chekhov and Uhura on the street, them looking for nuclear vessels, and the cop in the scene apparently was an actual cop who was there to provide security for the shoot. And Leonard Nimoy, said to them, go up and ask him, and told the cops, like, just stare at them, like, don't, whatever, just, and say whatever, just make sure you say nuclear vessels, that's the joke of the scene, like, say whatever you want. And the woman that walks up is just an extra, the one who says, ooh, I don't know if I know the answer to that, I think it's across the bay in Alameda. That was all improv, and they like grabbed her after she went off frame and like signed her up and paid her as a speaking actor in that, because it was such a great line.
There's actually a story behind that. She had, because of the filming, where she had parked, she'd gotten a really expensive ticket, because there's like not a lot of parking in San Francisco. Don't know if you've been there, but there's not a lot of places where you can park. And so she's like, okay, well, now I need money for this parking ticket. And so, she was already going to be an extra, but they let her have that, they let her do that line just to see how it would go. And because she had a speaking line, they had to induct her into SAG, because you have to do that. Here's the weird part, though, that most people don't know. The fees just to be in the Screen Actors Guild ain't cheap. So she probably ended up in the negative from this situation.
To the folks in the comments, I noticed them saying that she wasn't an extra. She was just a passerby who wandered into the shoot. I had always heard that story. I had heard that she was just a passerby that kind of wandered into the shot accidentally or something like that. But according to Leonard Nimoy on the commentary, and he may be misremembering, I don't know, he did say that she was a paid extra that they had just walking across, that was just supposed to kind of react and move on. But then she said the line and they were like, oh, perfect. So I don't know. I have heard that story as well. According to Leonard Nimoy, she was an extra. Who knows who's misremembering with the story? I don't know.
I've heard the bystander thing too, but it was always hard for me to believe that with the whole crew there shooting this film on the street, that this woman would just been passing by in the middle of that. I don't know. But it makes sense that it's an extra, and then that was all improvised.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, Aaron Geek Filter, again, I've heard that story. I always believed that as well. This is what Leonard Nimoy said, that story was not quite right, that she was paid extra beforehand. I don't know. Leonard Nimoy could be misremembering. I'm just going by what he said there. So, yeah. Anyway, the other improvised scene that I learned from this, which was not in the script, and say what you will about William Shatner. I know, we have differing opinions and stuff on his views in politics and all of that stuff. He's a good actor, and he knows what good acting and that sort of thing is. I learned in this commentary that the scripted version of him and Spock in the truck with Jillian, when she says, "You guys like Italian?" Kirk was supposed to say yes, Spock was supposed to say no, just at the same time, and like that was the joke. And they shot that, got the shots. And William Shatner, apparently, this is according to Nimoy, William Shatner said, like, I have an idea. Let's just riff this a little bit a few times. And knowing that, watching that scene, it's so much funnier with the no, yes, no, no, yes, no, yes. We love Italian. I love Italian. And so do you. Yes. It's so perfect.
It's so natural. It's really so natural. And so it doesn't surprise me that isn't actually the way it was scripted, because that is something you just don't get through rehearsal. That is that always felt like improv to me.
Yeah.
And I always loved it because of that, because it was freaking funny.
It's really good. And yeah, you can't write that. Like that was just on, that was just the two of them playing off each other, and that's what they ended up going with. And I don't know, just watching it again and knowing that, and just the little glint in Leonard Nimoy's eyes when he turns and says the final yes. I lost it. I laughed harder at that scene than I've ever laughed at it before, and I always thought it was hilarious. But that was great.
Yeah, it ranks up there with when Kirk realizes that Spock's in the tank with the whales. just he's looking around, and just that subtle, he looks at the tank, and then the slight widening of the eyes, and then his eyes get bigger, and he's just like, it's just, it's funny every time. Every time.
And again, I keep going back to the commentary. Obviously, like, you know, I knew that the tank wasn't really there, and you know, he wasn't actually reacting to Spock swimming there. But what's in front of him and Taylor through that whole scene that they're reacting to is a plain brick wall. And I'm like, these are great actors. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Like, that's terrific. Like, Taylor, what the hell? Like, I absolutely believe that's there. And same with Kirk. Like, it's just like,
yeah, it's so great.
So great.
So great. Love that scene every time. We were dying with laughter in the theater when that was happening. The whole theater was just rolling because it needed no words. And then when the little old lady's, maybe she's singing to that man.
I even love like Kirk's reaction to that. Like, he's like, oh crap, who's talking? Oh, it's this woman right here.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
and when
funny.
Jillian's like, what the hell? They just leave it there for a moment because she's saying it next to a nun. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, she doesn't care. Oh, so great.
So this might be a good point to kind of talk about, like, what are some of your favorite moments from this film? Because I mean, I think any discussion of Star Trek 4 usually kind of just evolves into that, like just the parts that stick with you.
Well, one of my, it was never a favorite moment, but the last few times I've watched it, it never really got me before, but now I laugh every time. And it's earlier when Kirk is explaining to Scotty that they have to go back in time to get humpbacks. And Scotty's like, humpback people?
Whales, Mr. Scott, whales.
Just the way he says it. Just cracking
About 40 or 50 long, 40 or 50 feet long, weighing 40 tons apiece.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Aaron, Geek Filter has that's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Doctor gave me a pill and I grew a new kidney.
Fully functional.
And apparently her line was that was not in the script either. They just on the day thought it would be funny to wheel her by and have that happening in the background while this is going on, which I thought that was a great choice as well, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to know her story. Like, you know, how many tests she went through after that for them to figure out, like, how the heck, like some scientific paper written up somewhere, some medical paper about spontaneous regrowth of a kidney. Like, what? I love it. It's so great. Patrick. Okay, Sulu in the helicopter when he accidentally turns on the wiper blades. When we're done here, if you've never noticed this before, what I want you to do is go back and watch that again. The wiper blades going across the screen. On the bottom of the wiper blade, you can see somebody's thumb moving it.
No.
It's one of my favorite bloopers. It's so good.
Oh, I should have noticed that.
It's one of those things that, like, people might hate me now because once you see it, you just like always notice it. It's like, oh, it's just a thumb right at the bottom of the frame going like this.
Is that something you noticed on your own, or did you hear that somewhere and then notice?
That was thanks to Phil Farrand and the Nitpickers Guides. That was I read that and like immediately popped in the VHS and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Absolute favorite. I love that. Yeah. The helicopter. So that shot of it flying across the San Francisco skyline with the plexiglass underneath, that is about a 8-inch long model helicopter, apparently, or something like that, or like a foot long model helicopter. Like, that is not a real helicopter.
How did they get George Takei in it then?
Don't call me tiny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say none of the whales are real.
That's
No,
true.
there's some footage of whales used at various
Yeah, at the
points.
very end,
Right.
especially
Mhm.
when the whales, after the probe is leaving and things are getting back to normal and the whales are basically celebrating. But yeah, any close up,
Yeah.
anything, like when Spock's mind melding with Gracie, that's a life-size animatronic whale.
Yeah. They
Really
didn't
well
build the
done.
whole they didn't build the whole whale for those scenes. They built parts of the whales, so for that close up with the mind meld, and also like the top of the whale with the blowhole. Those were almost full size. Leonard Nimoy said they're about 80%, but camera
Yeah.
work and stuff. But there were full animatronic ones that were built that were about 5 feet long, I think he said, that they used for like the full shots of them swimming underwater, which look incredible. Like they're so
Yes.
well done.
They are so well done because I'm sitting through the whole movie because I'd never really thought about the whales, and I thought, well, obviously those can't be real whales, so they have to be animatronic. But I can't tell that they're animatronic. They are just really well done, and so I had to read a little bit about them. And instead of waterproofing the entire body, they just sealed off everything that was electronic on the inside, because that was a lot easier and they could control that a lot more quickly and permanently than they could trying to waterproof the entire outside of the whale.
Yeah. The work they did was absolutely incredible. And you can't tell, and part of that was Leonard Nimoy was saying, like, the way they filmed it as well was they cranked up the frame rate and slowed the film down, because the movements, like, they got it just perfect. They did a really terrific job with those. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think did they win an Academy Award for that? Those special effects. I think they were nominated.
They were nominated. They were definitely nominated, but I don't know if they won. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, they really did some incredible stuff. They were, Aaron, yes, they were remote control. Those two, there were two people on the other side of plexiglass, basically doing joystick remote controls with them. Which I want to see footage of that. I don't know if there is behind the scenes footage of them operating those, but I would.
Oh,
love
there
to see
is.
that.
Yeah, I've seen it. Not. It's
Oh,
been a
cool.
while, but I've seen the stuff. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but before I forget, I've never mentioned this to anybody, but about the movie, because we were just saying about underwater. Towards the end of the movie, when Shatner is swimming underwater, his hair is like moving and stuff. And I thought, everyone always says he's wearing a hairpiece, but yet in the water it looks like it's real hair. So I didn't know if it was like plugs or something. But anyway.
I always watch that very closely too, because I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So if anybody knows, I'd be curious. But
Yeah, that scene always makes me tense because I have this fear of drowning. And so even though I know how it turns out, just it's hard on me every single time.
yeah, well, you probably don't want to listen to the commentary with William Shatner talking about filming that scene then, because so he couldn't see a thing. For one thing, he was navigating entirely by lights. Like, there was like, okay, there's a light kind of in this direction. I know I have to pass that one, then I have to pass that one. And he was in like a tube, covered tube. So he was very nervous throughout all of that, apparently. But yeah, that's scary.
Hard on me.
I've seen several people in the comments bring up Kirk Thatcher, the punk on the bus, of course.
Yes.
Production assistant on Star Trek IV, who also wrote and performed the song I Hate You, and who also you may have heard in the Short Treks episode Ephraim and Dot recently as well. So yeah, definitely a big name in Star Trek, and someone who made his mark starting here in Star Trek IV.
According to Wikipedia, he was an associate producer.
Oh,
not just a production assistant.
Yes.
And he also, when he found out about this scene, he went to Leonard Nimoy and begged to do it.
Mhm.
And in the script it said, well, the music is like Duran Duran or something, and he's like, no, that's not what punk rockers listen to. And he cut his hair and did the mohawk and colored it and got the clothes and everything.
Yep.
He did all of that himself.
He went to like vintage
All of it.
stores himself and like got all the everything he needed. It's great.
And probably about, I want to say 5 years ago, I have no sense of time anymore because time is not a constant. I was at Van X in Salt Lake City, and we were going to a Muppets panel, which had our good friend Chris Bodley on it. And guess who else was on that panel? Kirk Thatcher. But I didn't know who he was because he had, long white hair, long white beard, didn't recognize him.
Oh, yeah.
But when he said his name, I'm like, wait, I know that name. And then somebody in the audience asked him about Star Trek 4, and I'm like, of course. And I'm like, I'm sitting in a room with the punk on the bus, you guys.
Punk on the bus.
That's awesome. The genesis of that scene apparently was fairly shortly before they were working on the script and stuff for Star Trek 4, and Leonard Nimoy was in New York, and basically somebody came out of a building on this street with this huge boombox just blasting it as loud as possible, and he was thinking, oh man, if I were Spock, I would pinch the guts out of him, is what apparently he said. So I love that they got that into the film. That was really funny.
Yep, I have heard that story.
Aaron says, I thought you said Xanax, not Xanax.
Yeah. When
Sorry.
I was at Xanax, I didn't do well on Xanax. I had to switch to Wellbutrin, you guys, and it just wasn't working.
TJ, I've heard this, and I keep meaning, because I've seen the movie, and I always forget to look for it. But
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you exactly where it is. Okay.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
It's one of those times when he's like in the city, and there's a guy on the ground that's like, "Hey, do a backflip!" And Kirk Thatcher is standing just behind him, holding that boombox up on his shoulder.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna look for that now. That's awesome. Great. Story-wise, anything else that we want to talk about with regards to the in the past stuff, I guess, in 1986 based?
I always like the line, what does it mean? What do they mean exact change?
Yes.
But
What does it mean exact change?
Yeah.
I love.
What
No,
else?
go ahead.
No, I don't know. It's just, I know. I keep wanting to bring up the guy with the, and then it's hey computer, hello computer.
Yeah, and you can tell that work safety standards were not enforced, because there is no way in hell you should be riding on the on a pallet on a forklift. There is no way you should ever be doing that. And the reason that I know is because I am trained to run a forklift, y'all. And that is one of the biggest no-nos you could possibly ever commit. And so, I had forgotten about that. And so because I just remember that scene being McCoy going, "Don't bury yourself in the part." and this cheeky grin that Scotty gives him. But this time I'm just like, whoa, get off that forklift right now. You are gonna get killed. Yeah,
no, I've driven forklifts as well, and that always in my adult life pops out to me as like, whoa, that is not a good idea.
Yeah, well, the 80s were full of idiots.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole Plexicorp thing, I have so much love for this whole like world they've created in this, because like so much thought has gone into every little thing. We've got this Dr. Nichols in his office with his big, huge "I quit smoking" button.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, who thought of that to put on his costume? And I love it. And someone else in the comments already brought this up a while back, but the woman who comes in, not now, Madeline. I'm like, I want to know Madeline's story.
I know.
Yeah. She looked so happy to be coming into the room too, like she had some exciting news, and then she just gets shouted at. Poor Madeline. What did she do wrong?
Oh man. I feel like if this were the Star Wars universe, there'd be like a whole like comic mini series about her character, and she'd have a name and a bunch of backstory. But yeah, just Madeline. I don't know.
Madeline.
Yeah. She just barges right in like she can do every day and just smiling.
I just want to see like a short story. Like she was having a wonderful day up to that point and then just had a terrible day after. And all because this is why like time travel as a story conceit like ultimately would not work in real life because of the butterfly effect, because she would not have had that happen to her if McCoy and Scotty weren't there, and like who knows what knock-on effects that has had now, right? So but that's okay, that's not part of the story. But
it turns out she was actually the one who invented transparent aluminum, and that was taken from her by Nichols.
Damn it. Yeah.
So,
that's funny. Okay, so Andy says Trash Can Crushed was very thin, I think was pulled inwards from reading Cinefex magazine. I noticed something this time around that I hadn't noticed before, and that's that like I don't know why I noticed this time and never have before, but the trash can, when the bird of prey lands on it, gets pulled in from the middle but still kind of bulges out on the sides, and I'm like, no, it would have been, if that was like a foot pad, it would have been like totally flattened. But I did notice that. But then that got me to going like, how did they do that? Because it does look really good.
yeah, I don't know.
ILM.
They're amazing. They're wonderful. Absolutely.
They had to film that scene in a different park because it was too rainy in Golden Gate Park. So
yeah,
they filmed it in another park. I can't remember which one now, but
I can't remember the name, and I just heard Leonard Nimoy talking about it. But it was in Los Angeles. They filmed that in LA, not in San Francisco. Because like you said, it was raining too hard, and the parks people said like all of your filming trucks are gonna get stuck. Like you can't, even if this lets up, like you can't film here. So that was interesting.
I also like the scene with Chekhov when he gets captured on the USS Enterprise.
Yeah, that wasn't actually the USS Enterprise because it was actually at sea. That was the USS Ranger standing in for the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Because yes, I am a nerd and I know these things.
Yeah,
and
so
it was
maybe
shot not in San Francisco, but in San Diego.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. No, that's a terrific scene. Chekhov and the FBI agent, I think. It's just one of my favorites. It's like name. My name? No, my name. I do not know your name. You play games with me, mister, and we're through. I am. May I go now?
He turns and goes, I think he's some kind of idiot. Or
yeah, he doesn't use that word. He uses a word we don't use anymore. Yeah. No, he says something else. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention as well is not only is there no like big baddie in this film, there is exactly one firing of a phaser, and it's to melt a lock on a door. There's no other weapons fire. Chekhov tries, but doesn't work. But other than that,
the radiation.
There's also, I think it's in a novel. I think it might be in Greg Cox's Eugenics Wars, where one of the missions that Gary Seven and Roberta Lincoln go on is to sneak back aboard that aircraft carrier and retrieve the phaser and communicator and Starfleet ID of Chekhov's, which I always thought was clever because I was like, wait, he just totally left those in the hands of the FBI. That's not good.
I remember that in one of the books. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point because even when I listened to the Orsi Kurtzman commentary throughout, they kept talking about, how you're changing the timeline and what are the quantum mechanics that are in place for this movie, and what does it mean? Are you changing the timeline? Are you creating a new timeline? And they're just kind of lightheartedly talking about how time is always like, sometimes the way they approach time travel in Star Trek sometimes differs from one series or episode or movie to another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it all depends on what they need the plot to do.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and McCoy does bring that up to Scotty when he's like, "Are you sure we should be giving him this formula? That's altering history." He's like, "Why? How do you know he didn't invent the thing?" And McCoy's like, "Okay, yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah.
Sure, let's go with that."
That's such a strong argument.
Oh man.
Well, it's not like they could just pull up Wikipedia and check. So,
Not yet.
right. Nope, not yet.
One of the things I learned from the commentary as well, and I didn't know this, Leonard Nimoy was saying that so the screenplay is written by Harv Bennett and oh my god,
Nicholas Meyer.
Nick Meyer, thank you. Wow, it just flooded my. That was so weird because I had other Nick Meyer stuff I wanted to talk about, but apparently Harv Bennett wrote the stuff in the 23rd century, both at the beginning and end, and Nick Meyer wrote the 1986 stuff for the most part. Like there's a little bit of leeway here and there, but that was kind of how it went. I didn't know that. That's really cool that kind of came together that way.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it was probably not an easy process because they'd write something and then take it to Nimoy and he would sign off on it, and then they'd have to give it to the studio and then they would sign off on it, and they had trouble getting Shatner on board because he wasn't going to come back, and so they were starting to write around it, and they were even thinking about doing some kind of prequel thing, and then they offered Shatner more money and he finally got on board, and so then they'd have to get notes from Shatner, of course, and so I don't know how they got a script done with having to get approval from all of those people, but they managed to bang it out.
Mm-hmm. And create a banger of a film. Like this is just
absolutely.
It so holds together. Like there's nothing I would change, I think, about the movie.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to bring up from the Orsi Kurtzman commentary was they were talking about how the pacing is just perfect, and they said, now by the way, their commentary was recorded shortly before Star Trek 09 came out, because they kept talking about our new movie that's coming out soon, and they said, would a 12-year-old watch this today? Would that 12-year-old like this movie? Because the pacing's so good, but in movies like this nowadays we have to do it faster. We can't do that pacing. And the scene where you see Kirk and Spock walking along the bay with the Golden Gate Bridge behind them, they were talking about how that was such a great character scene between the two, and it helps the movie breathe. It takes a breath there in the movie, which they really like. And then they made the comment, too bad we're not allowed to do that anymore.
That makes me sad.
And they mentioned that again later, and they were saying how much, they would like to have in their movies the chance for certain scenes to breathe and have those character moments, but you can't do that anymore. And I thought, who's saying, and I'm assuming, of course, it's the studios, but it's like, who's saying you can't do that anymore? I mean, here's two people that wrote two Star Trek movies who would probably have liked to written it at the pace of Voyage Home, but they're forced to do it in a whole different manner. It's sad.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just because I would like those moments. And they said they were inspired more from this movie than any other Star Trek movie when they were writing Star Trek 09. So the scene, for example, when Scotty is at the computer, showing this guy how to make something for the future, they said that kind of inspired the scene of Spock showing Scotty in Star Trek 09 about transwarp beaming. Like, here's something you will later invent, but I'm going to show you now. So that came from Voyage Home. And also McCoy in the hospital trying to sneak, the patient in. My God, this man needs attention, or this woman needs attention, whatever, that also inspired that scene where McCoy's trying to get Kirk up to the Enterprise and like, I'm his doctor. Are you going to let this man suffer? So there were certain things. It was funny how they were pointing out certain scenes that inspired things in the movie, and the humor. And they kept saying about the humor in the characters. It's got to be character motivated. It's character humor. And they try to, they were inspired by that when they wrote the movie. So it was just interesting to hear them talk about that.
That is interesting, because it seems like Kurtzman got his wish, because in New Trek, we do get those character moments back.
Yes.
We do get those moments to breathe, and people can complain about them all they want, but that comes from original Trek. So just deal with it, kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that scene also for its content, where Kirk is saying, stop using the colorful metaphors, and Spock's like, but I'm doing it so good. And also telling him you don't have to tell the truth, the whole truth all the time. And he's like, I cannot. And I'm like, that's not true. And Kirk's like, well, I'm not mean lie, like exaggerate. You used to do this all the time. Don't you remember? Can't you remember? The hell I can't. And he pretty much gives up until that scene, when they're about to take off to go get the whales, and I can't even remember exactly what Kirk says, and he says, 1 damn minute, Admiral.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Oh,
Love
it's
it.
so good. These characters are so well established at this point, and the humor, like, all of them know their characters so well, and a lot of that, of course, is written on the page, but it's the delivery. It's these characters saying those that makes it so funny, and it's so terrific. One thing that struck me too was in the commentary, Shatner and Nimoy were talking a lot whenever DeForest Kelley was on screen about what a wonderful person he was, and how just innately humorous and friendly, and also very private. Apparently, I didn't know that. Apparently, he had never really invited them to his house. He kept his personal life very separate from his professional life, and was kind of an anomaly in that way, according to them, in the business. So I don't know. I would love to sit down, to be able somehow to sit down and talk with DeForest Kelley about his experience in all of this, because he's such just a human voice in this movie. And I don't know. I think his part in the movie, he has a big part in the film, but I feel like sometimes it gets overlooked or overshadowed by the Kirk-Spock interaction, that McCoy, he's always there and always that voice, and his stuff with Spock especially is just so good. I just want to make that known.
Yeah, there's just like that whole thing with, you mean I have to die to discuss your viewpoints on death?
Well, oh man.
Oh, there's just this. Yeah, their interactions, Spock and McCoy, gold every single time, every single scene, where it's just the two of them talking. I am receiving a number of distress calls.
I don't doubt
it. And I love when he's like, you present the appearance of a man with a problem. And then Spock explains why acceleration is no longer a constant. And he's like, well, you're just going to have to, guess. He's like, guessing is not in my nature. Well, nobody's perfect. And just the whole, nobody's perfect. That's a little expression he makes right after that, like, ha! Just so subtle, but so perfect at the same time.
I love the outtake from that scene where, like, he gives it long enough that obviously he's going to cut the scene before then, but McCoy says, well, nobody's perfect, and walks away, and Spock, want to bet? I love that. It's one of my favorite bits. I'm like, if you could somehow have the audio on that really good and like the picture quality really good and just like seamlessly edit that back into the movie,
Oh yeah,
I'd be okay with that.
like the Ryan edits
Yeah, exactly.
on
Wanted
YouTube.
it.
That would be cool. You know, you were saying about McCoy being, I'm sorry, DeForest Kelly being kind of a private person and all the nice things that they were saying about him. I remember hearing an interview at some point years ago where Shatner said that he really bonded with DeForest Kelly through Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. And if you think about all the years that they had worked together on these movies and the series, that was the moment that he said he really got to know DeForest, because when they were doing the Ruta Pente scenes and they had to go to wherever they shot it, like, you know, wherever, Alaska or whatever, they had to go, that they spent a lot of time there together. And he never had really just spent one-on-one time with him like that for a long period of time. And that was the time the two of them really did bond. And it's the last movie they were in together. You know, it's kind of funny how that works out.
Yeah, it's the original series is an interesting group. I mean, because you had your three stars. You had DeForest Kelly, Leonard Nimoy, and William Shatner as kind of the three main stars. And William Shatner even brings this up, pays a little bit of lip service to the other cast members in the commentary, and it's the only time he mentions them, where he says, you know, it was pretty much always the three of us, and the other actors knew their characters, came in and did their job, and they were wonderful. And then like moves on. That's like all he says about anybody else in the entire commentary, which reminded me, and I don't know if this was a recent tweet or if this is something that somebody screen capped from quite a while ago, but I recently saw a tweet from Walter Koenig, and it was heartbreaking. And he said, wow, the Deep Space Nine cast really all like each other. What's that like? And I was just like, oh my God, that's heartbreaking.
I'm glad you brought Walter Koenig, because I heard something recently where on something, I don't know. Oh, he was being interviewed from one of those, like, you know, broadcasting museum things or something like that. And he was saying how he was on an episode of Columbo, and William Shatner was on the same episode, but they didn't like share a scene together. But he did see Shatner there. They rode like a golf cart together at one point to get to the soundstage. So even though they weren't in the scene together, they were shooting like the same day. And he said Shatner didn't remember his name, couldn't remember his name. And then like a few days later, I just happened to see a video, and I'd seen this before. It's like some press thing.
Star Trek 5 one?
Exactly.
Yep.
And as Shatner's introducing everybody, he goes, and then the man who plays Chekhov. And Walter has to say his name for him. I'm like, okay, well, that's two instances years apart from each other, and he still doesn't seem to remember his name.
That's brutal.
The lack of respect.
I've seen that video. It is brutal. And yeah, I don't know what more I want to say about that. It's if you haven't seen that, it's Google or look up on YouTube, William Shatner forgets Walter Koenig's name. You'll probably find it. It's rough to watch.
Yeah, maybe you'll find the interview he's talking about when they were on Columbo and didn't remember.
Yeah.
And that was like in the early 80s, I think. So, I mean, both situations were like early 80s and late 80s, all in that decade.
Yeah, I hadn't heard the Columbo one. That's awful. Yeah.
I don't want to actually see that. I don't need to have that in my brain.
Yeah. Anyway,
maybe he knows his name is Walter. He just had a hard time with his last name and was always afraid to say it. I don't know.
We'll go with that. So moving on with the film, I guess, you know, we kind of covered most of what happens in the past there. We, of course, get the contrivance, which this always like bugs me just a little bit. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's, you know, how they get from A to B. But so they're escaping from the hospital with Chekhov, and Scotty beams them out of the elevator into the park, then lowers the entrance to the ship. They all get on the ship except for Kirk and Taylor, and the door closes again. So Kirk then has to signal Scotty to beam him onto the ship from the park, and then grabs him. And that all seems very complicated to me. First of all, I understand beaming them to the park to begin with, because you don't want Taylor to be on the ship, I guess, even though she's already been there. I don't know why they couldn't, but whatever.
Well, because they wouldn't be able to get her off and stay in her own time. That's my head.
Exactly. And I mean, like, plot-wise, that's exactly why they do that. It's just kind of funny if you sit down and think about like all the steps, like the site-to-site transport from the hospital to the park so that they can all walk onto the ship, and then Kirk is alone, and then they have to beam him onto the ship because, oops, they closed the door. It's kind of funny. And I loved in the commentary how Leonard Nimoy was saying like they worked on the timing so much for that scene so that you see like half a second of the door closing behind Kirk and Taylor talking, so you know the door's closing. And he's like, if I think about how much energy and time I put into making sure that made it on camera, and like now all these years later, I'm like, what the hell did that matter? Like, why was I so focused on that? And Shatner's like, yeah, you could have done it with sound. And Nimoy's like, yeah, I could have done it with sound. I love directors, how like in like the weeds they get with like their particular shots. It's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is actually universal with all directors. There's always that one thing that they wish they could go back and do differently with what they know now.
Yeah.
Actually, there's usually more than one thing, but yeah. And I was always disturbed by how can she just jump on him and have that transportation work?
Yeah, I don't know if, like, even if I knew for a fact in the 23rd century that, like, yeah, transporters can do that. If me as someone in 1986 saw this, like, I don't know that I'm going to trust that that's going to work.
Well, she's already survived it once, which I do love when she gets transported and she just starts screaming.
Oh my God. Ah! It's so good.
Which is absolutely what any one of us would do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
her acting
and then
in that scene too, like when she's like does the like mini collapse thing.
Well, not
so
only
good.
that, but he's like trying to pull her off the transporter pad, and like she's not moving her feet, and he's just kind of like, "Come on, get off of there." It's just so beautifully awkward and so well done that I just totally believe it.
It's so good. Yeah. She really is a joy in this film. I think she brings a lot to it, for sure. So, we rescue the whales in a scene that was directly influenced by Greenpeace in their pontoons getting between whalers and the whales they're hunting. According to Nimoy, they use the bird of prey in that way, which I love that. I love that whole... That's another scene. There's certain films that I've seen more like so many times, but I'm still like on the edge of my seat because it's so well directed and well done. And them descending to save the whales is one of those moments. And I think I could probably say Star Trek 4 is probably the film that I've watched the most out of any movie in the world. I think. I can't think of a movie I've seen more. And I'm still like, every time in that scene, I'm like, oh, it's so good. The music, the tension, all of it just is so well done there.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was really watching Catherine Hicks during this scene, and she just, she doesn't have a lot of lines. She has a line where they see that there's a whaling ship after the whales, and so they're trying so hard to get there, and she's just this silent tension, and sometimes she just closes her eyes for a few seconds and then opens them again. She is so good at portraying that tense feeling that it makes me tense, because she's the one who knows the most about the whales. She's the one who has spent all of this time with them. They're very dear to her, and nobody else on the ship has that connection with them except maybe Spock because of the mind meld. But, she communicates all of this wordlessly, and I don't think she gets enough recognition for just how good she is in this film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she really commits to that character and like lives it. And shoot, we didn't talk about this in the actual thing, did we? We talked about it beforehand. The scene where she slaps Bob at the Cetacean Institute.
Yeah.
She really slaps him. And if you watch that scene and look at his face, he is absolutely shocked that he got it hit as hard as he did in that scene. And according to the commentary, apparently the actor wasn't that happy about it, but ended up being a trooper when all was said and done, that he was okay with it. But apparently at the time he was displeased.
Well, yeah, obviously he didn't expect to really be hit. And
The actor complained about that so much that Leonard Nimoy was really annoyed with him. So he made the actor do the windshield wiper on the helicopter. So that's his thumb.
and I would like to point out that the Cetacean Institute was actually the Monterey Bay Aquarium. So it is a real aquarium, obviously. But yeah, they did well to make it look like it was a real place, because it was a real place. They just named it something else.
The actual aquarium part is not as big though in real life as you see. That anytime you see a wide shot of it, that is an ILM shot, as visual effects shot, which is really well done.
Really well done, especially when she comes out to see that the whales are gone. That scene right there is just like, I can't believe that's not real.
Beautiful shot. Absolutely.
Really good.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, they managed to rescue the whales, bring them forward in time, and then we get the wrap up of two of the big things in the film, which is the fate of the crew, which is, they're on trial for all of the things they did in Star Trek 3, and then Spock's conversation with his father, which is one of my favorite bits of Star Trek.
Okay, I just have to say that just seeing the two of them together on this rewatch, I was just thinking, I'm sorry. I like the other actors who have taken over those roles. I think they're good, but there's nobody like Leonard Nimoy and Mark Leonard. I mean, they're just so perfect for those roles. And the two, them together like that, I just love it. Yeah.
What kind of blew my mind is on the commentary at the beginning when Sarek is in the council chambers. Leonard Nimoy says, like, I always admired the actor who played Sarek. I don't know him very well. We never really talked all that much, but he did an excellent job and blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, that's crazy. And then I thought about it and I was like, for all the times we've seen Sarek, he has shared a scene with Spock twice or shared the screen in multiple scenes in an episode. But, two times have they really been together. That's in the TOS episode Journey to Babel, and then in this scene in Star Trek 4.
Yeah.
We see Sarek in Star Trek 3, we see him in Star Trek 6, we see him in The Next Generation and the other scene in this movie, but he does not do that with Leonard Nimoy, which kind of blew my mind, and I never really thought about that. But he's there a lot, but without Spock.
Yeah, but at the same time, the two of them would have been together because when they weren't in scenes together in 3 and 4, Leonard Nimoy was directing them, so they did spend more time together outside of those scenes.
That's true too.
Still not a lot.
It's interesting. It's just something I'd never really thought of, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, I never thought about that either. It's like, I would just think, oh yeah, they've been in several scenes together, and then you go, well, no, not really.
Yeah,
no. Well, that's kind of their deal, though, because Sarek didn't want Spock to enlist in Starfleet, and they actually bring that up in this film. He says, as I recall, I objected to your enlisting in Starfleet, and it is possible that judgment was incorrect, which is a big admission from a Vulcan, you guys.
Yeah.
So
I love that dialogue where he says, your colleagues are people of good character. And Spock says, they are my friends. And Sarek is just like,
yes, of course. It's like, he doesn't know what it's like to have friends. Sarek has no friends.
Aw. But
Oh,
yeah.
poor Sarek.
And of course, we get Kirk's demotion to captain, which is his first best destiny, according to both Spock and Leonard Nimoy. Apparently, that was one of the
Yep.
things he wanted to do with this movie, was undo that. Was because he didn't like Kirk as a desk-bound admiral. He thought was not what Star Trek should be. So, good choice. Good choice.
Good choice. Yeah. I was actually watching this film again, and like I said, I've seen it 100 times. I was so much more emotional about it this time than I ever have been. Just things where I'm just like, I've never cried at this scene before. just little things. Just little things. Like when the bird of prey materializes in front of the whaling ship, and I'm like, yeah, that's right, you jerks, you better turn around and run away. Just things like that. And it just completely took me by surprise, because again, seen this movie 100 times, but it's, I don't know, it's the beauty of Trek, and I've said this before, is that every part of life is different. And so when you see something that you've watched 100 times before at a different point in your life, you have a different experience. And so I just had a different experience. It was still a great experience. I still love it as much as I ever did, but there was a lot more crying for me this time.
Yeah. No, I get that for sure. It's more moving, I find, as I get older, for sure. And the environmental message, which I think informed me a lot as a kid and was formative for me, I think just resonates that much more as we get further along too, with the more we learn about unintended consequences and that sort of thing. I mean, as horrible as the mass hunting of whales is, they're not aiming to destroy the planet. The people doing that have a livelihood that they're doing and that kind of thing. Their goal isn't to destroy humanity's future, but according to this film, in this fictional world, that's the knock-on effect. And people digging for oil at the turn of the century, they're trying to make money, they're trying to advance technology and that kind of thing. They're not trying to destroy the planet. You can make different arguments for people who are still involved in advancing that or not. I'll leave that alone for now, but it's unintended consequences, right? And I think that's a big theme in this movie that is just as important, if not more so, today than it was when the movie came out.
Yeah, well, when we first see the Cetacean Institute and Jillian is doing her thing, and she talks about why people are still, hunting and killing whales, and she says, it's for these things that most of which can be achieved synthetically now. Mm-hmm. So basically, there's not really a good enough reason for people to continue whaling, but they are.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I can't watch that footage that's on the screen when she's talking about that. I can't watch it. Yeah. And these days, that would make a movie PG-13.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, they just left it at PG, because all of that was real footage.
Yep.
All of that was real footage of whaling, and I can't watch it. I can't.
Yeah, they talked a little bit about the footage and where they found it, and how it was footage made by whalers, right, who were proud of their craft. Like, they were showing what they do and how they do it and all this kind of stuff. And it's horrific. Like, the slaughter boats is what Leonard Nimoy calls the ships, right? Like, it's pretty brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, in the Ortsy Kurtzman commentary, they were commenting how surprised they were that was put in there, but not just that it was in there, but how long. They said Nimoy elected to stay on that. It wasn't just something that they showed for a few seconds. He stayed on that for a while, showing different footage of it, and it is, I mean, it's disturbing, and yeah, I think you're right, Brandon. I think it would get a PG-13 today.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I don't disagree with it being in the film. It
Right.
needs to be in there, and it needs to be real, and it needs to be disturbing, because
Yeah.
otherwise you're not going to get your point across.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for posterity, I'm so glad it's in this movie, because that reaction, that visceral reaction to it, is absolutely what's needed, to realize this is awful. These are living creatures who may or may not be as intelligent as us. We don't know. Like, you're kind of flipping a coin here. And even putting that aside, that doesn't matter. These are inoffensive creatures who have done nothing to us, as Taylor says. So, it's important, and I'm glad it's there. And
Yes.
yeah, it's brutal and needfully so, if that's a correct phrase.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. I think we've pretty much covered the movie. Anything that I've missed that anybody wants to talk about, Brandy?
Yeah, there's one thing at the very end of the movie. Well, almost at the very end of the movie, when they're going to go to their new ship.
Yes.
So when I watched this movie, now remember, I wasn't a big Star Trek fan at this point. I mean, I'd seen all the movies. I really liked the movies. I'd seen some of the original episodes, but I was so excited to see this new Enterprise or new ship that they were going on. And I was kind of hoping, like Sulu, it was going to be Excelsior, because I thought the Excelsior was cool.
Excelsior? Why in God's name would you want that bucket of bolts?
Right. A ship is a ship, Mr. Scott. Yes,
and then
I will be done.
They start to fly over the Excelsior, and I'm like, ooh. And then there's this Enterprise that looks just like the previous Enterprise, and I was disappointed.
Oh,
I wasn't.
Because, I mean, I love, first of all, the refit Enterprise A is my favorite ship. Right. But back then, I'm watching this, in the 80s, thinking like, we're going to get some new looking type of ship, something.
You want the new hotness, the hot rod. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's going to be something really cool. And it's like, it's the exact same thing. I was like, it sucks.
But it's not really. It's different on the inside.
Well,
yeah, it's all broken down and busted according to Star Trek 5.
Right.
Yeah. As a child, when we saw this, because I was 13 when this movie came out. So as a kid, I was devastated in Star Trek 3 when the Enterprise blew up, and I'm just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What? Because there is no time in my life before Star Trek. There was never I can remember my first episode because I was a baby and my parents were watching it. So therefore, I was exposed to it from the begining.
Were they watching in the delivery room?
No, they weren't watching it in the delivery room, but my parents, I was the second of 3 girls, and it was a 2-bedroom house, and mom always had the baby with her because babies. And so I know that I was in the room plenty of times when they were watching Star Trek. And so there was never a beginning point for me because it was just always there. And so I was absolutely devastated at the end of Star Trek 3. I just was just like, but you did. And I just could not deal. It took me some time to deal. And so when they got to that shot in the end of Star Trek 4, seriously, like everyone in the theater was like, yeah! Mm-hmm. So it was kind of contagious. Wow. So now I just cry. Now I just cry when it shows up. So, what I do.
That's cool. I really do wish that I had been able to see this in the theater when it yeah, but I'm a new Trekkie, so
that's okay. And it wasn't until the last 5 years that I was finally able to see Star Trek: The Motion Picture and Wrath of Khan on the big screen. And even though, again, I'd seen both of those movies probably 100 times throughout my life, it was still so moving to be able to finally get to see that on the big screen. So there's never a time where it's not moving to have that experience.
Yeah.
You know, I made the joke, and I meant it as a joke when I said about your parents watching Star Trek in the delivery room. And then after I said that, I realized that is there's a true story about that for me, because when my wife, not my parents weren't watching, but when my wife went into the delivery room to have our first child, I was in there with her, and you're not just like go in there and have the baby, like you're in there for a period of time, right? And they're
Hours.
Yeah. And there was TV, and I remember, one of the people working there said, you want me to turn the TV on for you? And she said, yeah, sure, that would help. They turned it on, and The Next Generation was on. And we left it on that channel. And I just remember being like, my daughter's going to be born to The Next Generation. And I said, are you okay with keeping this on, honey? She's like, yeah, sure. But it didn't happen because then she had to have a C-section. So they had to take her to an operating room. But I just like, that almost happened.
That's pretty cool. That's funny. I think ratings wise, like we're all giving this a 5. I can't see anything else. So I guess just final thoughts from the two of you and from our wonderful people in the comments. Final thoughts on Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Bruce.
I mean, I think we've said everything. I mean, I really like it. I love the humor of it. I like that it's a light movie, especially after coming after the others. And we're talking about having scenes that are a breather. Well, this is the breather in this trilogy and the breather within the whole series of movies. So I really like that. Exactly.
Seriously, go watch it. It's hilarious.
I'm going to.
Visible.
I'm going to.
Oh, you do it now. But I'm just thinking back at that time. I didn't know that many people who went to see The Search for Spock. But when this movie came out, everybody I knew saw The Voyage Home, whether they liked Star Trek or not. I mean, it was just a very popular movie at the time. And when I went to see Star Trek V, I was like, oh, they're trying to be, I thought, okay, every movie now, because this was such a big hit, every movie is going to be a comedy because the humor was so appreciated by general audiences and they loved it. So when Star Trek V came out and there's all those, humorous lines, supposed to be humorous and stuff, it doesn't work as well. And I thought, and I remember thinking, this is what they're going to do from now on. Every Star Trek movie is going to try to be funny. But thankfully, when we got to the Undiscovered Country, it wasn't. I mean, there's still humor, but
Oh yes.
But not. But the Star Trek V, it was too forced. But yeah. Mm-hmm. But anyway, 5 out of 5. Thumb.
For me, this movie has nothing but good feelings attached to it. Just the experience of seeing it in the theater with my family and all of us enjoying it. Just growing up in a Trek family was just an amazing thing. And we all still love Trek. It's just part of our DNA at this point. I even remember the trailer for the film, and the trailer is on my Blu-ray. So I rewatched the trailer and I'm like, yep. Because there'll be parts of the movie where I'm like, that was in the trailer. That was in the trailer. That was in the trailer, but the line was delivered later. Like when they're getting off the ship and as they're coming down the gangplank, the gangway, that's when Kirk says, everybody remember where we parked. But in the trailer, it's after they're walking away from the ship that they put in the line, everybody remember where we parked. And so, I remembered all of those little things because we saw that trailer like 50 million times before the movie came out. It was just in every commercial break at the time. So, yeah. Good times. Love it.
Yeah. I always have a hard time ranking things in like a list. I don't know if this is my favorite Star Trek movie, but it might be my favorite Star Trek movie to watch. Like the one that I have the most fun while watching, maybe. I don't know. But it's so good. And like I said earlier, I think I've seen it more than any other movie I've ever seen, and I never tire of it. I don't know that I could watch it tomorrow after just having watched it today. Maybe to listen to the other commentary, but it's so good. I just, it never gets old. I laugh at all the same parts, and it's one of those ones that I could have on in the background while I'm doing something else because I just know it'll lift my spirits. It'll make me happy. It's such a good film. I don't know what more I can say about it than that. So,
True.
Yeah, that's our Star Trek 4 discussion. And surprisingly, it was kind of one of those things where I thought like everything that could be said about this film's been said. What are we really going to talk about? But this is one of the most fun discussions I've had, I think. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I've never actually gotten to talk about Star Trek 4 in this kind of forum. So this has been very fun for me.
Nice. Mossy, nice. Love that. All right. Do we want to do this again next week? That's a yes.
I'm always a yes. Always.
All right. So starting now, first 3 films or episodes, Star Trek wise, that we see in the comments, we will pick, and then we'll do a random one as well, if that works for everyone.
Agreed.
All right. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. Do we want to? We can start working on the random one while we're waiting for the comments. I already see worst case scenario from Patrick.
The Visitor and
Ooh.
Crisis Point, Crosspoint. Brandy can read. You want to see me cry by putting The Visitor in there. Thank you.
Yeah.
It is really hard for me to talk about that without crying.
Crisis Point is Lower Decks. Nice. That's my favorite Lower Decks episode.
It's such a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wayne Frazier. Okay. Bruce, do you want to do the honors with the randomization thing?
Sure. Now, it was 1 through 10?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hey, Siri, give me a number between 1 and 10.
A random number between 1 and 10 is 5.
So that's Voyager?
Right, because TAS. So Voyager, yeah. All right. So 7 seasons of Voyager.
Hey, Siri, give me a number between 1 and 7.
A random number between 1 and 7 is 5.
Ooh, okay. Now, it probably had 26 episodes, but let's just double check. 26 episodes, yeah.
All right. Hey, Siri, give me a number between 1 and 26.
A random number between 1 and 26 is 20.
20. Episode 20 is Think Tank. Interesting. So Think Tank was the one with Jason Alexander guest starring as the guy with the Don't pick Think Tank. All right. Okay, so I will do up a to poll on the Positively Trek Twitter account with worst case scenario from Voyager, The Visitor from Deep Space Nine, Crisis Point from Lower Decks, and Think Tank from Voyager. And the episode with the most votes after 2 days, I'll set it for 2 days. That's the one we'll talk about next week. All right. All that's left is to ask, where can everyone be found when they're not joining me here on Saturday? Brandy.
Easiest place to know what I'm doing is just to go to Twitter and find me at Brandywine12. Brandy's with an I, the 12 is a number. You can see what podcasts I'm doing, which are mostly Star Trek podcasts because I am a nerd. And that's just the easiest way because I could go through things, but it's easier to just go look on Twitter. I'm exhausted, you guys. Exhausted.
Bruce?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. And I'm on Positively Trek podcast with Dan. And I'm occasionally on the Star Wars Report podcast. And I'm occasionally been doing some episodes of Literary Treks on some weird network called TFM. What the heck is up with that? TFM? But anyway, that's where you'll find me.
Awesome. And you can find me on Twitter at Kertrats. That's KERTRATS. And of course, as Bruce said, on Positively Trek, where we're covering all new episodes whenever they come out, as well as just general Trek discussion and Star Trek books and comics. So join us there. It's lots of fun. And subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because then you'll know when we go live next Saturday, which will be at the same time. So discussing one of these wonderful episodes. So we'll see you all then. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone in the chat for joining us. And thank you so much to everyone watching us later. Really do appreciate all of you. So we will see you again next week. Take care. And